Welcome to Carrying Connected Conversations. I'm Sydney, a spiritual mentor who guides and supports you to live in alignment by finding and owning your power.
I'm Angie, a fitness and life coach, teaching you to love yourself unconditionally by staying accountable to your goals in fitness, food, life, and love. Syd and I are real-life BFFs and biz partners. Our deepest desire is to see you succeed in life by being willing and vulnerable to step out of your comfort zone.
We're constantly learning from each other while also providing support through every breakdown and every breakthrough. Not every conversation is easy. It's the difficult ones that lead you to create deeper connections in your life.
We want to inspire and empower you to love your life. So get ready for conversations filled with laughter, tears, and everything in between. Let's get connecting.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Carrying Connected Conversations. We are here for episode 109 to carry on a very connected conversation, hence the title of this podcast. Thank you so much for choosing to press play. I feel like an announcer. Thank you so much for choosing to press play and to join us in this conversation. This is Sydney, if you did not know. I am excited to be here. I'm a little tired, to be honest, because I just woke up not too long ago. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays into the conversation. But as you know, we are human. And so we have to go with the flow depending on what our emotions and our energy levels are every single day. So if you're watching on YouTube, please excuse my eyelids because they're not very open. But I'm here, I am being intentional, and I'm excited to connect with Ange and see what's going on. So Ange, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'll be honest, I'm feeling a lot more awake, I think, than you are.
Yeah, you've probably been up for like 8 hours already.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're always 2 hours behind. So it's pretty much first thing in the morning. And I've been up, I think 3 hours before your first thing in the morning. So almost a full 8 hours.
Yeah.
Pretty much half of that.
Yeah, you're bringing the energy today. So that's good. I'm just drinking the coffee.
I still have my coffee here, I'll be honest. Oh man. But yeah, I'm feeling so good today. Just in general, I'm feeling good about this convo, and I'm glad that I can at least bring the energy forward today, because I would love to chat about something that's been so common in my personal life, but it's also been kind of transpiring in your life because you're a part of my life. So it's this whole idea of busyness. Okay. I know we all have our own levels of busyness, but I want to be so real with you guys. Because Syd and I'll be honest, let me just even rewind for a sec. Syd and I, the reason why we started this podcast was because we had weekly, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week, and they would be 3 to 4 hour long phone conversations. They're on FaceTiming each other, usually FaceTiming, I'd say phone call, but actually it was usually FaceTime. And we would just get so in depth with what we're learning, what we're implementing, what we're going through, what we're moving through, literally all the things. And we were each other's accountability partners. And we realized these conversations that we were having were so intense and so good that why keep it to ourselves? And we wanted to kind of remove that selfish conversation from it just being between us, to share it with everybody else, because we realize the things that we talk about are very relevant in our everyday lives. And we wanted to create some relatability, not only for our listeners, but even for our clients and just literally the people in our lives, because we have found that talking about things that make you feel super uncomfortable are actually super beneficial, because it holds you accountable. It helps you stay true to yourself, and it helps you adjust things. Of course, if that's what you're desiring to do, is to adjust. So going back now to this whole concept of being busy, I think the reason why I want to bring it up is because I'm always going 100 miles a minute. I've always joked about this in the podcast. My brain is like a constant EDM music festival. I'll be honest. In the past 6 months, it hasn't been feeling like an EDM crazy festival anymore. It's been feeling more like constant music, but less like boom, 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 because I've been so intentional with trying to structure my busy life. And I've realized when I don't structure my busy life, guess what happens? Boom, 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 boom. My mind is like 100 beats a minute because there's 100 thoughts a minute, 100 thoughts a second, even for that matter. So I'm wanting to come to a place where I can feel where I don't want to feel that anymore. I don't want to feel that constant chatter. So I'm trying to hold myself accountable. And again, going back to this whole concept or idea of having a busy schedule, it's understanding that yes, your busyness is for your own stuff to manage, but it's also important for you to communicate that to other people that are involved in your schedule. And that was one thing that fell short for me, is that I was so focused on myself and my busyness that I completely forgot to relay on that busy schedule to other people that I was supposed to have within that schedule. And I'm hoping this has happened to at least one other person in the world, because I know I'm not the only one when I say this. Obviously, some of you guys might relate a lot more to Syd, and that's totally fine. But that's why, again, Syd and I come forward with these conversations to show you that we're two completely different people, but we still have to process things like this in life. So I kind of just want to leave it there. I know it was very generalized, this whole busy topic, but Syd, like, bring forward what you got.
Yeah, I think that I think that this conversation is something that's important to be had on multiple different levels. I think the way that you're explaining it, obviously, I know what you're talking about because you're talking about your life and how your busyness affects my life. And that's really what the topic of this conversation is. And some hurdles that you and I, not just as friends, but as business partners with this podcast, have had to climb over. We've had to really get over these hurdles in being very different people. And, how do we want to move forward as partners in a harmonious way? Because that's what I bring to life, is the idea of harmony and balance, and what works for one person, recognizing that it doesn't work for everyone. And so what can we do in a relationship in order to figure out how to cross this barrier together, rather than one person running ahead and calling behind and saying, get over here because I'm already here. And I think what you're saying, this idea of communicating with other people when your schedule affects them, is really important. But it's really important to look at it in a broader perspective as well. I think I would like to take this conversation deeper and really kind of talking through what you and I had to go through. But I want the listeners to recognize whether or not this specific conversation and the depth that we take it in relates to someone. Ultimately, what we're talking about is how in relationships, your energy is affecting the other person in the relationship, and however that shows up. And it's really important to build a sense of awareness on, how you're experiencing life and where your energy levels are at, and thinking about that other person and bringing that level of communication in and saying, like, hey, I'm aware that what I'm doing right now may be affecting you. So can we have an open and honest conversation on how you're feeling, how I'm feeling, and what we can do to support each other in this space? And I think for you and I, Ange, we weren't having that conversation for a couple of different reasons. And eventually, when we finally had that conversation, harmony was able to play into our relationship, and we were able to support each other in our differences in what felt good. So in saying that, I want to kind of tie in, like, why weren't we having the conversation? Like, your life was really busy. You live a busy life. I love how you're saying you're wanting to be a lot more intentional with changing what's going on in your mind, right? You're saying it was EDM music and now it's no longer EDM music because you're very intentional and you're present and in the moment. And I think that's huge. And I think that really plays into your personal growth and the shifts that you've been moving through. But on the flip side, I don't want to say but, and on the flip side, I'm very different, and what I desire out of my life is very different than you. And I have a much more peaceful, calm, silent mind that I've
Yes.
really integrated and embodied, and I've really practiced, and I've really honed in on the commitment that I have to myself and the type of life that I want to live. So our minds are very different, and we've both grown in our own aspects in what we choose to create for ourselves. So why weren't we having a conversation? I'd love to share my end, but I kind of want to flip it back over in conversational style. Like, how are you feeling in kind of sharing, our experiences through this?
Yeah, I think I'm in a much better place now to talk about it. I don't know how in depth you want to go, but I'll take this conversation wherever you want to go, but at the end of the day, I know that I was going to be in a place of being able to share it. And normally I am in a place of wanting to share it as I go through it. And I'll be honest, because that's just how I process things. I process things for what it is. Whereas obviously we know you and I are different. You process things on your own and then you bring it forward to me. And I also wanted to kind of point that out because it makes sense why we didn't have our conversations, because you were trying to process things on your own. And I'm aware that you process things on your own, but then I'm kind of like, well, I'm just not going to bug her with my busy schedule because I got so much going on anyways, without really realizing that it's actually affecting and impacting your schedule. And to kind of answer your question, I don't have an answer to say like, oh, this is why we haven't been chatting as much. And it goes back into the busyness of life. Like, I'm sure anybody here that's watching this is probably like, yeah, I'm pretty busy too. Or no, I got all the time in the world, right? Like, we got two different contrasting people here, but at the end of the day, how can we create harmony knowing that there is such a contrast in the relationship? And that's simply by having a conversation. And it's not to say it needs to be a confrontational conversation. It needs to come from a place of just trying to understand the other person. You don't need to try to better explain yourself. That's coming from an ego-driven space. You're coming from a place of wanting to create harmony. Harmony is all soul-driven. You need to be speaking from your heart. You need to be speaking your truth so that the other person can understand you. And that's the intention, where the intention lies. So why have those conversations not had? I feel like I need to just blame my busy schedule because I don't have a definite answer. But at the same time, I would love to know if you do have an answer to that, Syd.
Well, I think what you already said kind of to me gives an answer, in the sense that you said, that I process things in my own way, and you're a verbal processor. And so maybe whether it was a conscious thought or it was a subconscious thought, I don't know, like on your part, but that space of like, I'm going to let Syd process this. I have a busy schedule. Like, it's not to say that you said, I don't have time for this, because that's not at all what you said, but in the sense of like, you have other things that are going on. And so it's like, okay, if it's not time to talk about this yet, then I'm going to do other things. I'm going to focus on other things. I think ultimately what it comes down to is that both parties have to be prepared to have a conversation, or maybe not prepared, but open to have a conversation, right? And I think because we were very much in our own spaces, in our own ways of processing things, you didn't know when and if I was open to having the conversation, and I didn't know when and if you were open to having the conversation. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think moving forward, we've learned from this experience, and we can say, okay, a lot earlier on, one of us, I hate to say it, but most likely you, because you're usually prepared to talk about something before I am, can say, hey, this is really important to me. I'd love to have a conversation with you about this when you're ready. And
Yes.
for me, like, I don't want to, I'm not placing blame, and I'm not saying either of us are at wrong here, but for me, knowing that you are acknowledging what's going on and that you want to have a conversation about something, for me, it would help me get that much closer to the point of being ready to have a conversation. right? Because what you just said there is you said, like, we don't have to be confrontational and we're wanting to understand the other person, right? For me, I have a huge fear around confrontation, and it's not around, trying to understand somebody else and somebody else's point of view, because I think I am very much bred into the space of trying to understand somebody else's point of view. And I think that that comes from my Libra sun sign of really wanting harmony in relationships. So I'm usually always trying to see somebody else's point of view. And I'm often not allowing myself to see my own point of view. So that comes from my people-pleasing tendencies. So in our specific situation, like, I know you lead a busy life. I know that your life is a lot busier than mine, and I would never fault you for that. And I'm often, especially before we had our conversation, I'm trying to hold grace for you in understanding, like, her life is a lot busier than mine. So I'm going to hold grace as much as I can if she's a little bit late for our conversations, right? Or we're needing to reschedule. Also, because for me, like, sometimes I've been sick and I've wanted to reschedule. So I would never want to fault someone for wanting to reschedule, because I know sometimes I do as well. So it was very much for me that the challenge in bringing forward the conversation was I had to get to a point of recognizing, damn, this is really affecting my emotions. And it's affecting my emotions so much that I've tried to change my mindset. I've tried to change the way that I respond to this situation, right? And it's getting to a point now where I need to actually say something so Ange understands where I'm coming from and how her actions are affecting me in this relationship that we have. Again, not to place blame and not to be a victim, but I was recognizing I feel like my expectations are very different than your expectations. And I want to and need to bring harmony into this relationship so we can harmonize our expectations and we can be at the same playing field. So I'm not feeling like I'm always being let down, which is not at all what I felt, but that's just an easier way to explain it.
Totally.
So for me in that space of confrontation, it was me having to get comfortable with my own emotions and how I was being affected by this situation. So then I was ready to actually have a conversation. I had to get clear on, where is my mind right now, and what answer. Not that I had to figure out an answer, but like, what do I want? What do I need from this?
Yeah.
Knowing that you have a busy schedule, I can't sit here and tell you, like, get rid of everything and let this be the only thing, right? So it's just, so then we got to a point where I said, hey, we need to have a conversation about this. And so when I finally brought that up to you, what was going through your mind, or how did you kind of experience that moving forward?
Well, it's funny because I'm like, I knew this for so long, and yet I withheld that information to myself because, I mean,
you can what?
So you can correct me on this, but I'm just going to speak for myself on this. I feel like I'm an empath. I take on energy from whether it's the other person or whether it's my own energy, as I've been corrected once before, but I really strongly feel an energetic presence in my presence that I know is not necessarily mine. Now, does that mean it's directly from my actions? Does it mean it's directly from my own conditioning? Who knows? Irrelevant, but I knew that something needs to be discussed. And the reason why I'm saying this is because there's been times, I don't know, we've chatted about this in the podcast before, but this specific example about the mountain, we were wanting to hike down or hike up. I literally don't even remember what the circumstance was, but I just remember I wanted to talk to you about it, like right there in that moment. And that's the first moment I realized, oh, she just needs space to process. And that's totally okay. But I'm in a place where I'm like, hey, let's talk about it. Like, I want to make sure that things are smoothed out in accordance with each other. So knowing that first, like, I don't want to say like incident, but like that first time where we've realized that there was some sort of conflict or tension, it was a lot easier for me to better understand moving forward how you process things. And I need to come from a place of acknowledging that, hey, there's something that needs to be discussed, but there's also a time and a place for it to be discussed. And all I need to say is, hey, I'd love to speak to you when you feel ready about not even saying about what it is, but just saying it for what it is. And now I'm in a lot a better place to understand that, especially after our long conversations we have with each other, because I always come to such a more clearer and better understanding from where either of us stand in anything. And yeah, so when it first came up, when you brought that forward, I was sitting here like, well, I kind of want to bring this up like 2 weeks ago, but it for some reason just never did. And it was like I knew it was coming. I always knew it was coming, because whether I dismissed it on my own behalf or whether I just didn't acknowledge it the way that I needed to acknowledge it for you to understand, or to have us both, like, I guess, on the same page in that regard. It was almost like I then put the onus on you for you to just tell me when you need to tell me, because clearly me telling you ahead of time isn't working. So it was interesting for that to happen the way that it did, because it was the complete polar opposite before, where it was like, let me tell you first, and then it was like, well, I'm just going to wait for her to tell me, and then it was too late at that point. So now I think we need to find this happy ground, and I think we have found this happy ground through talking about it, because without us talking about it and without us actually getting to the nitty gritty of things, then there's not really much to go off of other than someone having very heavy, and I'm going to use the word resentful, emotions towards another person, because usually those resentful emotions come up because either we're holding on to something or we're waiting for the other person to say something and they just don't. So I call it resentment feelings, but you can call them also heavy feelings. There's just a heavy weighted, like a weight on your shoulder in a sense, like whether it's you feel it on your chest or on your shoulders, but it's because something needs to be said and it's just not said. So yeah, go, you jump in. I said my piece.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it really shows how we're different people, because again, always tying in that human design, you're an emotional authority. So like you're meant to have emotional waves. You're meant to have highs and lows and in-betweens. And again, I'm speaking for you, so like you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you've learned how to have conversations in each of those moments. Yes. You will address something when you're in a low, and you'll address something when you're in a high, and you'll address something when you're in a neutral space, because and maybe this is something you've learned recently or you've always known, but the emotion's not going to last forever. And so I will get to that high eventually, but I have to address this while I'm in this moment. I'm a non-emotional in human design. So I'm not meant to have emotional waves, or sorry, not that I'm not meant to, it's that I'm not I can't trust my emotional waves. I can't trust that up and down feeling, because I'm picking up usually on somebody else's energy in that space. And so for me and my emotions, I've had to learn how to acknowledge my emotions and not blame a situation, not blame a person, not blame a moment in time for my emotions, but instead just say, wait a second, I'm feeling emotions. How can I honor this? How can I release this? Because whether they're mine or they're not mine, I don't need to hold on to them. And so, again, that mountain scenario, you're like, whoa, I can feel that something's off. Let's address this. Whereas I'm like, whoa, I can feel that something's off. I need to get into a much calmer state before I'm ready to have a discussion with someone, right? So it's just two very different ways of going about things. And for me, especially in that moment, I felt like you were saying, hey, like, you're feeling a certain way. Let's talk about this. Which is exactly what you were saying, right? Hey, I can tell that you're feeling a certain way. Let's talk about this. And for me, it's like, maybe it's something that I need to heal through in my own space of like having somebody tell me how I feel. But it's very much like, you don't know how I feel. Like that's how, like in the moment, I'm like, you can't tell me how I feel. So like, just give me some space and let me figure. And I think that's where emotional intelligence comes into play, right? It's like, yes, you can. I think both of us have a strong sense of being able to tell when somebody else is feeling an emotion, right? Both of us are empaths. Both of us can pick that up from someone else. But it's also the reminder of like, everyone's emotions are their own emotions.
Mhm.
And if they want to heal through them, or they want to understand them, or they want to process them, that's a decision that they have to make. And we can't make somebody feel a certain emotion. And so the way that we choose to broach that subject is something that you and I are learning right now, and how we do it together in our relationship. And it may be different for everyone in every relationship, in every scenario, right? But for me personally, it's a space of, in how I process my emotions, I'm the kind of person that I don't necessarily want to tell another person right away, because I want to first figure out, like, are my emotions qualified? Like, is my frustration on somebody else's actions like necessary? Is there something that, like, I'm carrying, like a pattern or conditioning deep within me that is causing me to react this way? And I can actually heal something within myself without making somebody else do something differently. And so that's why it took me a while to finally be like, okay, now I'm ready to actually talk about this, because I've tried to heal in my own way, and I've tried to do my own thing over here. And now I'm recognizing, no, this is a conversation that we need to have, and we need to figure out where we both stand in this relationship.
100%. And I want to bring something forward, because I don't know if I've said this to you before ever. But it brought me back to the place of why I was trying to, I hate for this word, but confront you in terms of why you were feeling the way that you were feeling. And it's in part of this whole idea of, like, feeling other people's emotions, or at least just seeing if someone is off. I can 100% sense if someone's off, because their mood will shift. They go from a bubbly personality, like I know them always as, to, oh, yeah, sure. And they're holding it. And I sense that. I know that for myself. However, at the same time, my anxiety is 100,000% on tenfold all the time. And I'm always thinking it's me. I did something wrong, so let me fix it. I want to fix it right away. So for me, coming from a confrontational place of, hey, you're not feeling like, you're feeling off. Like, do you want to talk about it? Because clearly I did something to bug you. So I'm trying to give you the space for you to tell me, like, what it is that I bugged you with. At least this is what I'm assuming when I first created this conversation. So you can tell me and I can fix it. We move on with our lives. But again, this was not coming from a place of us having that conversation already, for me to understand that you need to process those things on your own. And then when you're ready to talk about them, you will. Now I know that moving forward, but I can definitely say, in the moments where I feel something, then it almost makes sense, because I feel like I'm kind of contradicting what I said earlier in the episode today, but it seems a lot clearer now, is that it's most likely because there is something that I know I've done that affects the other person, but it's never actually been said. And for me to say it out loud, like you're saying, this whole verbal processing, for me to say it out loud, it's like that definite confirmation that yes, it is true. So let's deal with it accordingly, because clearly my actions are impeding on your emotions, and that's not something that I desire to give to another human being, because that's, especially if it's in a negative way. So I don't know if I've ever shared that with you, or if that even makes sense, but it kind of seemed very clear to me in that moment where you're bringing that up.
Yeah, I think that does make sense. I mean, my mind goes a lot of different ways when you bring that up. I think the first thing that kind of comes forward for me is, like, it's not always about you. So, like, that's your anxiety playing in, right? It might actually have nothing to do with you, but it's your anxiety that's telling me, this is my fault. This is my fault. How can I fix this? Whereas sometimes like, someone might just be feeling a certain way because of thing, right? Like the mountain, nothing was your fault in the mountain. It was simply, I was surrounded by a lot of people, and being a non-emotional, I was picking up on everyone's emotions and everyone else's energy. And that was very overwhelming for me. And I felt extremely tired when we were walking down the mountain. And so you saying, hey, I feel like you're, feeling a certain way, let's talk about it. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I need some fucking space. Like, nobody talk to me. Nobody stand around me. Like, leave me alone so I can get back into my center. So I can come back to my spirit. So I can come back to who I am. So I can come back to the bubbly, uplifting energy that I am. Right. So it, like, in that scene, like, it had nothing to do with you. And it had
I thought it had everything to do with me, which is just funny how it goes through conversation. That's how we determine it's not.
Right. Exactly.
You're on your spiritual journey, desiring to create a deeper connection with your inner spirit and your soul path. But you feel lost in how to create more joy and calmness through life's challenges. In the meditation membership, you will feel seen for who you are and understood in a way that feels empowering and uplifting, alongside a community of like-minded beings. For only $33 per month, you will get 2 live calls filled with spiritual lessons, open-minded conversation, and powerful guided meditations. Join the meditation membership for more connection and support as you grow into the best version of you.
And that maybe is something for both of us to learn in our relationship, right? Because obviously this specific scenario of the conversation that we had a few weeks ago, yeah, that did have to do with your actions, right? And I think in that sense, you were waiting for me to say, hey, Ange, your actions are affecting me. And I was waiting for you to say, hey, Sydney, I realize that my actions are really playing into this scenario right now. I'm trying to figure things out. Right. So like we both were kind of in our own spaces thinking about what we wanted the other person to do or say. And me not liking. Well, and like you having tried to confront me in the past and me shutting it down, you've learned, okay, Sydney doesn't like confrontation, and me not liking confrontation. I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything. Right. So then it gets to that point where it needed to keep building and building and building and getting worse and worse and worse to finally have the conversation and say, okay, like, where are our expectations? Because that was what it was for me, was like, where are our priorities? Where are our expectations? Because I feel like I'm up here and I don't know where you stand. I don't want to be up here waiting for you to get up here as well. If I need to rearrange how I'm showing up in this relationship, then I'm happy to do so. But let's have a conversation. Let's figure this out together.
I 100% agree. And this is to also show why it's important to not have expectations, not necessarily for you, not necessarily from me, but to understand where each person is coming from. Because if we don't create that level of understanding, saying like, hey, I'm this, like, you are my priority, or this is a priority in my life, where do you sit? It's just to understand where they also sit. Because when we create expectations for the other person to show up in the same capacity that we are, that's not fair. That's not fair, because I don't know what those expectations are without a conversation. But we've proven through conversation, we can find that out. But if we don't have conversations, like, how the heck am I supposed to know what you're thinking? And how the heck are you supposed to know what I'm thinking, or what's even going on in our lives? And again, like, having this safe, supportive place to be able to speak our mind when we feel off, I think it's so important. And I just want to highlight, like, this is why you're my best friend. Because even though this is a conversation that not most people want to have, we're sitting here and we're having it honestly, truthfully, just to help us create a stronger connection within each of us, but also to show that it's also possible to create these strong connections outside in your own relationships. And like, Syd and I are BFFs. We're also biz partners. Like, we're all the things. But again, like, that doesn't mean how we treat this relationship cannot be transpired into other relationships of in our lives. And that's, again, the whole point of this conversation. Yes, it's conversation, but the podcast, why we've created these podcasts, because these are the conversations that are very difficult to have. And expectations, as we are clearly finding out, are not being met if neither one of us is able to communicate that, which brings us back down to the whole like communication thing, right? Like, we as human beings, like, we need to communicate to ourselves, to the other person, to all people involved, what's going on in our life, so you can better understand, or the other person can better understand you, and say like, yeah, this girl's got a really freaking busy schedule, so I need to get that. Or, hey, Syd's got a very open schedule, I need to take that in consideration, but not I don't want to use the word,
but advantage of it.
Yeah, I was going to say abuse, but I'm like, I don't really want to use that word. But you
said advantage of it.
Yeah, don't take advantage. 100%.
because that's really what it comes down to, is that like, yes, through our conversation that we eventually had, I figured out that like our expectations are off, but it's not like beforehand I thought. It's not even like, it's hard with the word expectations, because like I agree with what you're saying, like don't hold expectations for somebody else, but I think really what was the struggle was like, well, we had communicated when we were meeting. And so it was like that. So it was like, we had the same expectation. This is when we're meeting. Right. And so
that's like a definite expectation, because that's like an outcome. 100% agreed on that. Yeah.
Right. So it was in that space of like, okay, hold on a second. Like we have an expectation. We have a point here, and not even an expectation. We have a point of contact when we've decided that this is what's going to happen. And both of us are kind of playing into this in a different way. Why?
Gotcha.
And I think that's ultimately what it came down to, was like neither like I didn't want to place blame on you because I know you have a busy life. And again, what you just said, you didn't want to take advantage of me because I have a very open schedule and I'm really flexible. And I try to carry a lot of grace in that space. And so it was like, we needed to be able to have a conversation rather than trying to see other people's point of view without actually asking that person's point of view. We needed to actually say like, why is this happening? And again, no placing blame. Like, why are you, Angie, showing up in the way that you're showing up? And why are you, Sydney, showing up in the way that you're showing up? And what are both of our parts in this situation? And how can we find common ground here in order to move forward? So we're on the same page and we know how to show up for each other. Yes. And ultimately, that's what it comes back to. That's why having these kinds of connected conversations is important in relationships, whether it's a friendship, a coworker, a spouse, a family member. We don't actually know what's going on in somebody else's mind. We don't actually know why somebody else's emotions are being triggered in the way that they're being triggered. And so if you want to be able to have a strong relationship, you have to be willing to have these open conversations with zero expectation, with zero judgment, and not trying to prove your point, simply sharing what your experience is in hopes that the other person understands you. And if they don't, going a little bit deeper and sharing a little bit more. And then at the same time, trying to understand the other person's experience as best you can.
100%. And to kind of just add on to what you're saying, this idea of like pointing blame, I think it's so important for us to recognize that not everything is everybody else's fault. We have to take ownership. So why not start with how we feel in a situation and express how we feel before we start listing off what all the other things wrong the other person did? What's it matter? They did it. Okay. They were in charge of that. That was up to them. But how do you feel? How do you feel based off of the cards that were laid to you? And if you're not able to communicate what's on you, then it's going to be a lot harder to have those conversations because you're so quickly focused on pointing the blame. Yeah. And we're trying to show you there's another way of doing it.
Tired of trying multiple fad diets and various workout programs, yet still feel like there is nothing working? Lacking the consistency and confidence in your own knowledge of what to do in and out of the gym is why those last 10 pounds feel impossible to lose. You need the accountability to remind yourself that this is a lifestyle you're creating, not an end result. Why? Because your happy, healthy life is the result. I'm here to show you how to feel good about your body every single day, and the Fit and Free membership does just that. It's for the woman who needs accountability and a structured program or routine. For only $40 a month, you'll get 8 live recorded workouts with a personal trainer, 1 mindset coaching call, and over 50 plus different workouts to do on your own every single month. Get started by joining the Fit and Free membership today.
Well, and that's exactly it. It's like you have to, like you're saying, Ange, we have to take ownership of our own emotions. Yes. Like I can't sit here and say, Ange, your actions made me feel away. Because exactly. Like you have no control over my emotions. They're my emotions, right?
I'm sorry. Like
yeah, exactly. So I think that's a huge point, is like really taking ownership of your own emotions and recognizing like even though the other person is making an action, like you have to take ownership for your emotions, and you have to do your own healing work in order to figure out, okay, what do I want to do moving forward? Which is what brought me to that point of saying, hey, I need to have a conversation. And personally, for our relationship, I think this is a huge starting point for us to move forward, is saying, whether it's you, Ange, whether it's me, Sydney, saying, hey, this is frustrating me. I would love to have a conversation with you, not right now, but can we find a time to have that conversation? If you were to come to me and say that, I would feel so much more peace, because in all the previous times that you would say like, hey, Sydney, it sounds like something's wrong. Like, do you want to talk about this? I'm like, don't tell me how my feelings are. That's the first thing, like, because that is an irritant for me. Don't tell me that you know what I'm feeling, because you're not inside of me. And also, like, because confrontation is an issue of mine, it's like, I need time and space, not to prepare so I know what to say, but to prepare emotionally and to prepare energetically for a conversation that I know is going to be challenging. And so I think having that moment, it gave, at least, I don't know about you, Ange, but it gave me the space to say of like, okay, she knows that there's something I want to talk about that's challenging for me to talk about. Now I can prepare myself to have an open conversation about it.
100%. And then it just opens up or I want to say opens up, but I find it kind of removes that weight. It removes that pressure, whether you feel it on your chest, your shoulders, like physically in your body, wherever you feel it, it gives it the permission to be lifted just for a moment for you to then process what's going on internally. Because without that pressure removed, what happens if we have zero emotional intelligence? We are going to react based off of whatever emotion we're currently in. So if we're feeling that heavy weighted emotion, we're going to react in that same regard. Whereas we're trying to give the other person opportunity to, better understand them, or have them better communicate themselves so you can understand them better. But if we all have this weight or this pressure on us, how the heck are we supposed to say like, this bugged me, without saying like, you did this wrong? We have to create safe, supportive places. And it all starts by just finding that common ground on how to open up that safe space. And you and I have clearly established how to do that for ourselves. And I think that's so important for us to transmute that to other relationships, but also to share this conversation for other people to check in with themselves. Where are your emotions when you are in a confrontational place, or in a place where you're needing to confront something? Are you in a high emotion, low emotion? Have you at least communicated that you need to speak about something? Maybe it doesn't have to be right now, but if not, then what can you do to support yourself so you don't have that heavy weighted feeling on you anymore?
I love how you brought that up too, because right away, as soon as you said that heavy weighted feeling, what came to my mind is defensiveness.
Yes.
Like that, like
100%.
if some, like, because if you're, not that you were coming at me, but when you would bring it up, I felt like I need to defend myself. I need to defend myself. And that's a very low vibrational energy where I need to prove my point. So, and it's this hierarchical power, right? And then for me, if I had just came at you with my frustrations, you would have felt you would have been defensive, right? I need to defend myself. So simply by stating that of, hey, we need to have a conversation, not right now, but let's find a time and place. Exactly what you just said, Ange. What we're doing is we're creating an open and safe space that has middle ground. So we're not trying to prove one person above the next. We're saying, hey, we're equal. How can we have an open and honest conversation right now where nobody's defensive, nobody's trying to prove a point, nobody's trying to one up one another. We're simply just sharing our emotions, we're sharing our thoughts, and we're trying to find harmony so we can move forward, having a stronger relationship.
Yes. This is why I love you.
And it's all like, it all takes time, and it's all a point to grow, right? Like ultimately that's what we're here for, is we're here to learn and grow, and our relationships provide a beautiful space for us to learn and grow. And so as much as I was frustrated with you for a long time, now our relationship is even stronger, and who we are individually is even stronger because we've created that space together to grow.
100%. 100%. Oh, I love this. Okay. I want to keep chatting, but I'm just looking at the time. I think we should hop into a little card reading. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that that's a great idea, because I think that there's a lot that you and I can take from this conversation, especially
much.
because this is the first time that we're like evaluating a challenging conversation that we already had. And so now we can communicate even better moving forward. And hopefully the listeners can take something away from this, especially if it's even just the fact that like we're not perfect friends. We still get frustrated with each other and carry resentment towards each other sometimes.
Yeah, that's, I guess, what makes us human.
Right. So I'm just shuffling up the cards here and just asking, what do we need to know right now? What's an extra piece of guidance that we need to carry into our lives right now? There we go.
Oh my God, that was hilarious.
Beautiful. Okay, so the card is nurture from Archangel Gabriel. As you nurture a child, you nurture your own inner child. Both activities are important for you right now. I think that this is actually a great card to play into the conversation that we had, right? Like, obviously you're not a child, I'm not a child, but the way that we moved through the conversation, in a sense, is as if we were talking to a child, not in like diminishing one person or trying to be above someone, but instead in the space of if a child comes to you and is hurt or whatever, it's a space of like, hey, what's going on? Like, how can I comfort you? How can I hold space for you? Right? Like children are so vulnerable and they need someone to take care of them. And so this card is reminding us that when we take care of a child or when we take care of someone, remembering that we're all just children, like we're children in grown bodies, right? But
literally
we all desire to be nurtured. We all desire to feel supported. We all desire to be comforted. And so when we're having a conversation that carries that nurturing energy, whether we are nurturing a child or we're nurturing an adult, what we're doing is we're also nurturing our own inner child, which we all have. And it's that space where, like I just said, we want to feel comforted. We want to feel supported. We want to feel loved. So how can we bring this idea of nurturing into our relationships with other people and into our relationships with ourselves?
That is like the perfect card. And, I'm going to bring this up because you talked about this earlier, this idea of, this always happens. I've said, like, my mind goes 100 miles a minute when you say something that like sparks interest. And then I'm trying to remember because I'm like, hold it together, Ange. I'm sure it'll come back. Anyways, it was how you explained, the nurturing aspect for your own inner child, right? Like you're not only nurturing the situation, but it's like this give and take, like you're giving the nurturing vibes to also receive the nurturing vibes. So earlier you said like, well, it'd be nice if you said that for me, when meanwhile, like you just needed it for yourself. And it's the same thing, right? If you can give that to somebody else and say like, hey, I need to reschedule because like I'm not feeling well, for example, it's because you're also expecting that person is going to understand you. You want to receive that. So if you can't give that to yourself, then how are you going to be able to receive it? Right? It's that give and take. So understanding that common ground, that nurturing doesn't mean you always have to give it, but if you give it, you will receive it. And if we can at least have that understanding when we create a conversation with that open space, it'll be so much easier for you to come to whatever terms you're needing to come to and have the emotions and the ego, the heavy, not the happy ones, but the heavy ones, go and dissipate. And it just creates openness and love and harmony and creating a solution together. And it's just so much easier in a nurturing state. But if you're not in it, then you're going to be in the energy that you dwell in, unfortunately. So yeah.
Yeah. And just on top of that, with that that idea of give and take, like you said, if you give, then you will receive. It's always that reminder that like, if you feel like you're not receiving equally, then that's a space for you to say something, right? Because like, how can you receive nurturing energy from someone else if you're not recognizing that you need it, and you're not saying, hey, I need it, and I need it in this way? Because again, like, we can't read each other's minds. So that brings in that idea of harmony, which is what we created in our relationship through today's conversation and through the conversation that we had in the past, is getting clear on what is it that you need, how is it that you give, and how can we find harmony between the two, and how we show up for each other.
100%. Oh, I am so happy this conversation went the way that it did. I hope that our listeners and our viewers are also thinking the same. And I hope you guys are getting some ideas or some sparks of interest in terms of how you can start creating a conversation in your life for something that really is in importance to you. And if you haven't found the right words or the right things to say, focus on how you're feeling right now and what you want. What is your outcome? What is your desired result? What are you trying? What's your intention from having a conversation? If you can get crystal clear with that, the words are going to come so naturally, because when you can speak from the heart, you're speaking from a place of honesty, and you're speaking from a place of receiving the understanding that you're trying to get in the first place. So with that said, we're going to leave it here. Episode 109. What? That when you said that when we first started, I'm like, oh my God, how? But we're here. We're almost in the triple 111 vibes, and you know me about numbers. I'm super here for it. So from now until our next episode, we are going to be sending you guys so much love, so much strength, so much encouragement, and so much safe, supportive place for not only the other person, but for you to create for yourself, to create the clarity with the other person. And we're just excited for those difficult conversations to be had with a wonderful, harmonious solution to be made. So we love you. And until next time, we'll chat later.
Bye.